Nikkei Asia News Roundup
with Jada and Brian. Welcome to the Nikkei Asia News Roundup with your hosts, Jada and Brian.
bringing you the latest updates and insights on the dynamic world of Asia and more.
Now let's delve into the headlines. This program is brought to you by Nikkei.
A prolonged heat wave broiling Japan is beginning to impact crops and livestock, with vegetables becoming more expensive and prices for domestically produced pork hitting a 50-year high.
Yum China, the operator of KFC and Pizza Hut in the mainland market, is accelerating its expansion into smaller and generally less well-off cities, taking advantage of its new low-cost store models.
Japanese engineering company IHI will take part in the planning of a suspension bridge project in Italy with a contract value worth $12.3 billion, the company has announced. If completed, the Strait of Messina Bridge would be the longest suspension bridge in the world, connecting the Italian peninsula to the island of Sicily.
Sri Lanka is bidding big in South Asia's gambling world as a new $125 million casino opens its doors at a lavish integrated resort.
China has begun construction on the world's largest hydroelectric power project in the Tibet Autonomous Region, a move believed to be partly aimed at strengthening the restive region's economic links to the rest of the country.
After months of heavy lobbying and fierce competition, an upgraded version of Japan's Mogami-class frigate has been selected by Australia for its new fleet of warships, setting the scene for deeper defense sector cooperation between Canberra and Tokyo. Now moving on to the next segment.
Faith goes mainstream in Malaysia as spiritual events rival concerts. A growing private sector movement is tapping into demand for accessible spiritual inspiration in Malaysia from both Muslims and Christians, an area that was for decades the preserve of state or government-affiliated agencies. Up to thousands of people attend each event, with fans coming from across Malaysia, Singapore, and beyond. Foreign speakers, vendor booths, merchandise, sponsors, including the country's biggest banks, and live streaming ensure that shows mirror large-scale concerts. But the gatherings are marketed as spiritual enrichment rather than simple entertainment. The English-language Islamic platform Faith Events has hosted more than 45 conferences attended by some 50,000 people. The company targets urban millennials, with 70% of attendees aged between 25 and 40, and more than half are women. Christian congregations are riding the same momentum. One 26-year-old conference goer described these events as, quote, very like a Christian rave party. You don't know where the line is between worship and concert anymore. Ticket revenues for these events often fall short of total costs, however. Christian event organizer Kingdom City, for instance, keeps ticket prices low to ensure accessibility and relies on sponsorship and donor support. But while organizers might not be seeking wealth, the economic impact is tangible for many hotels, restaurants, and transport operators, in addition to event venues, which now benefit from religious tourism at levels once reserved for concerts and tourism expos.
Bangladesh extortion crisis hits businesses and fuels inflation. Extortion by political groups in Bangladesh has reached a new and chaotic peak a year after the fall of Sheikh Hasina, with economists warning that it is fueling inflation and business leaders saying it is creating a climate of fear. While extortion was a fact of life under Hasina as well, the business community says there used to be a predictable system overseen by affiliates of the then-ruling party, the Awami League. But following a mass uprising last July that culminated with Hasina resigning and fleeing the country on August 5th, that order fractured, giving way to a decentralized practice involving multiple political groups. While allegations were initially focused on local affiliates of the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, more recently supporters of Jamaat-e-Islam and student groups, the latter having led the uprising against Hasina, have faced similar accusations, along with opportunists unaffiliated with any political party. In a recent case, a gang led by a former senior figure in the Students Against Discrimination group allegedly coerced an ex-Awami League lawmaker into paying about 50 million taka, or $400,000. At least 70 cases of extortion were reported every month in the first half of this year in the Dhaka metropolitan area, according to police data. That compares with 59 cases for all of 2022 and 22 cases in 2021.
And now for news highlights. In each episode, Jada and I have a discussion about a recent article that has particularly captured our attention.
And today we like to talk about a story where Vietnam is trying to call back their Vietnamese people.
Yeah, I was going to say today we're going to Vietnam, but we're not going to Vietnam. Other people are going to Vietnam.
Yes.
Or so Vietnam hopes. And
yes.
particularly not just anybody. But overseas Vietnamese. That includes people who are born and raised in Vietnam and now live abroad, but also people of Vietnamese ancestry.
Yeah. And it's said that the government estimates there's about 6 million of what these so-called people, they call overseas Vietnamese. And they currently live in 130 countries or territories. And some 80% reside in developed countries. So mostly the number one country is the U.S., followed by Cambodia and Japan, are where these overseas Vietnamese live.
And you touched on how a lot of them live in developed countries. A lot of them are educated, highly educated in technical skills, and that is specifically what Vietnam is aiming at.
Yes, they want talented, skilled people to come back and help the economy grow further.
Yeah, this is a part. They had 8% growth last year, and they want more. And it's all part of this greater reform that Vietnam's been going through. They're calling it one of the biggest reforms in the past 4 decades.
Yes.
And one of their goals is to build up their tech sector, their engineering sector, and they want to bring in people. But one of the problems is there's not many people in Vietnam with enough degrees or education on that. So they're hoping to entice people. And so the question is, how do you entice them? And one of them is appealing to culture. Because they do admit the salaries will probably be less than a tech worker in Silicon Valley.
Yeah. They do say it'll be offset by the cost of living being lower in Vietnam anyway. But yeah, as you mentioned, the cultural aspect, there's a kind of an anecdote. The reporter in Vietnam talked to this guy who actually did move back to Vietnam from the U.S. with his family, and he works at a securities companies now in Vietnam. But he was saying, he feels sort of a fulfillment of seeing his kids write in Vietnamese for the first time and being able to dine with his father a few times a week. So
yeah, that was one they pointed out. They said a lot of these people have family, extended family, sometimes parents, living in Vietnam, and this is a thing where they spend 10 or 20 years making a name for themselves abroad, and now they can come back and be there with their families. And one of the other things they're going to try to work on is offering dual citizenship to these people.
Yeah, so I think that's a big part of this initiative, right? And I thought when that news first came out, I thought it was very interesting that Vietnamese, a communist, the image is a communist, very closed off country offering dual citizenship, but you can really tell how kind of in rush they are to get people back, it seems.
Yeah, you hear about places talking about brain drains, but this is the opposite. I guess the opposite of a brain drain is a brain gain. And this could be going on for several years because it's just really getting started right now.
Yeah, and their ultimate goal is to reach by 2045 I think high income developed country.
I think you got that right.
It's a mouthful of words there, but
it's the person you were talking about earlier who's moving back with his family. Exciting to see his kid. he said this opportunity, I like this quote, it's uncomfortably exciting. It's an interesting way of looking at it.
Oh. Yeah. The story does have also comments from somebody who did try to move back to Vietnam, but it didn't really work out.
That was one of the opposite anecdotes, yeah, where somebody said they lived in Singapore for a while, and they said it's just easier to go through the paperwork of getting businesses started and other such things like that, and how Vietnam's a little more bureaucratic. That's another thing Vietnam is kind of famous for, is the size of the bureaucracy. But that also seems to be a part of some of the reforms. We don't, they haven't really given all the details yet, but that seems to be one of the hurdles to getting people more enticed to come over.
And that brings us to the close of today's episode.
We look forward to having you join up again for the next edition of the Nikkei Asia News Roundup.
Stay informed, stay curious. Until next time, I'm Jada.
And I'm Brian. See you again, and take care. This program is brought to you by Nikkei.